Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I want to give you a real quick explanation of a term that you've probably seen on food labels. It's called net carbs. And so I'm asked quite often, how do I deal with this concept of net carbohydrates? Because you'll see certain food products, manufacturers will have the normal food label, right, on the package somewhere, and then it's generally from a marketing perspective or for marketing purposes. They'll put something like total net carbs is like 2 grams or 3 grams or whatever the case is. Really very straightforward. I'll just give you an explanation. The actual usage or how you're going to use it practically is something else entirely. But the quick explanation is that net carbohydrates is simply those carbohydrates that are actually digestible by the human digestive system. Generally, if you look on a package, like if I have a packaged food, you'll see the breakdown of macronutrients, total or number of carbohydrates, proteins, fats per serving, right? So the total carbohydrates in this case, let's just say it's 30 grams. So you're looking at a package, whatever it is, or you're reading a food label in some way, shape, or form, and you see 30 grams total carbohydrate, right? And so that's generally what you're using if you're looking at any type of food labeling or trying to use food labeling in your fitness app, like MyFitnessPal or something like that, and you're adding in 30 grams of carbohydrates because that's perhaps the serving size. And so now what we're seeing is this term called net carbohydrates, because remember, in that quote 30 grams of carbohydrate, in general, not all of those grams of carbohydrate are actually going to provide energy. Remember, 1 gram of a carbohydrate, remember that's a broad term, will provide essentially 4 kilocalories of energy. So if I have 30 grams of carbohydrate in a food and I eat it, technically I should get 120 calories out of it, right? 30 times 4 is 120. Now, that never happens. There's more variables that are involved with it. But the point here is that this concept then of net carbohydrates is supposed to kind of guide you and help you in your understanding of what you just ate actually might not have any caloric value. Why? Because total carbohydrates includes all the different types of quote carbohydrates that are available in that food. Sugars, right? Sugar alcohols are essentially carbohydrates. There's also fiber, right? And then, of course, there's just the total load of carbohydrates that you might get. For instance, if you're eating a potato, are there any sugars in a potato? Well, technically, no. I mean, it's generally just going to be, quote, starch, right? So amylose, amylopectin. The point is that total carbohydrate number, in this case, I'm giving you an example of 30 grams, might be, I don't know, 20 grams of sugar, right? 20 grams of whatever sugar they're using. It could be 5 grams of sugar alcohols and maybe even 4 grams or 5 grams of fiber. Okay. Technically, then out of that 30 grams of total carbohydrate that you ate, those 5 grams of fiber has no caloric value to you at all. In other words, 5 times 4, 20 of those calories. It's now really the food that you thought was providing 120 calories, technically only provides you, quote, 100 calories. Now, is that going to make a difference, significant difference in your fat loss goals? And the answer is probably no. So what is the whole point? The whole point of net carbohydrates is to give a more nuanced explanation of the type of carbohydrates that you are eating, right? And again, it's generally going to be because from a marketing perspective, if I can say that if you eat my food that contains 20 grams of carbohydrates, and let's say you're on a keto diet or whatever, you're trying to reduce your carbohydrate intake, but it's only net carbs of 3. Well, the impact of those 3 grams of carbohydrates is really all you care about anyway. The other whatever grams that are in fiber, for instance, have little to no impact calorically on your body. So normally what we do is we see net carbohydrates as kind of a way, nuanced way to look at the food and go, really the impact or the carbohydrate impact is not really as bad as we thought it was, right? Because technically, if I have a food that is very high in fiber, for instance, right? Technically, all the fiber, whether it's 5 grams or 10 grams of fiber, it's a carbohydrate. It's part of the total carbohydrate number you see on your package. But the fact of the matter is that ultimately its caloric impact is zero. It's one of the reasons why when you eat lettuce or green leafy vegetables, they have essentially no calories to them. They're very low calorie. Why? Because the majority of the carbohydrate contained in, and yes, greens and vegetables, certain vegetables that are very high in fiber, right? Generally, that's the only carbohydrate that you're finding in them. It's mainly cellulose or some other fibrous carbohydrate. And when all is said and done, they don't cellulose provides no caloric value to the human body. So again, the idea of net carbohydrates simply means that out of all the carbohydrates that you're consuming, not all of them, right, actually provide caloric value. And so the concept of net carbohydrate is basically telling you that these are the total grams of carbs that are going to, quote, impact your blood sugar, right? That are going to have some impact on the amount of blood sugar that ultimately shows up, right, after you eat this particular food, right? So if you have low net carbs, right, it probably means that the food has a very high level of carbohydrates, for instance. If you have a high level of net carbs, right, nobody's going to say that you have a high net carb load. No food manufacturer wants to say, yeah, we've got a ton of net carbs. No, the point of the marketing is to get you to purchase their product because it has a low impact of carbohydrates, meaning the net carbs are relatively low. So that's why any packaged food you see, you pick up a packaged food, whatever you're looking at, you look at it, net carbs, 3 grams of net carbs, and you look on the back and you're like, wait a minute, it has 25 total grams. Yeah, it could be that there's sugar alcohols, there's fiber in it, and generally it's the fiber that's going to make the most impact um, when it comes to the net carbs and the value of carbohydrate value of that particular food. Now, why don't we care a whole lot about it? Because for the most part, we're not interested in promoting and having people eat lots of processed foods that are showing you that their net carbs are relatively low. We already know that generally whole foods with lots of fiber have a lower impact on blood sugar levels anyway, because fiber itself is going to impact the amount of sugar that ultimately gets or shows up in the blood system because of what fiber, particularly soluble fiber, does when you consume it with sugars. It's going to have a binding effect and it's going to essentially lower the impact or what we call the glycemic index. So without going too much further, I just wanted to give an explanation of what we're talking about with net carbohydrates. Do yourself a favor. Please don't just jump on that bandwagon and start looking for foods and products that actually tell you net carbs are 3 grams. Fact of the matter is it's probably on a package. It's probably canned. I'm not saying that those are the worst things to consume, but you would be, or at least wanting to choose and let clients know to choose more whole foods that they can cook and then eat on a regular basis. So if you have any questions or more questions, let us know in the comment section below. As always, subscribe to the channel. If you got any questions, we are more than happy to help you with that. Have a great week. Take care.